Lon Strickler is no stranger to the strange. As host of Arcane Radio and the Beyond Explanation YouTube channel, and guide to one of the most comprehensive compendiums of Fortean research in the modern age, Phantoms and Monsters, Lon has investigated and logged more experiences with the unknown than most of us have ever considered. In addition to his role as one of the leading researchers and field investigators of various phenomena, he has also lived a life inundated with the otherworldly. From an intense experience of clairvoyance on the battlefields near Gettysburg as a boy, to an encounter with the Sykesville monster while fishing in the early 80s, for Lon, the paranormal is personal. Tonight, we hear some of his strangest investigations and his own run-ins with that which should not be. In addition, we discuss the Chicago Mothman, upright canids around the nation, the occult and magical aspects of the unknown, and so much more, as Midnight in Kentucky goes in conversation with Lon Strickler.
Welcome to Kentucky.
The birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
But when the hour grows late, the bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the Bell Witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes bump in the bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky.
Ladies and gentlemen, the full moon has risen once again. It is the midnight hour for Midnight in Kentucky. I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Tonight, we have a very special guest with us. We are speaking with Lon Strickler of Phantoms and Monsters, one of the best paranormal investigation sites on the internet. We've talked a lot about Lon on this show. We've used a lot of his research throughout Kentucky and honestly throughout the United States and the world on the show. But before we do that, be sure to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook,
Twitter,
YouTube,
MidnightKentucky.com.
And of course, that YouTube is our Ransom Letter Publishing YouTube that we are hoping to get more shows and more stuff out on soon, other than just Midnight in Kentucky stuff. There's music from Ransom Letter Publishing artists over there, as well as most of the back catalog of Midnight in Kentucky is still working on getting episodes up on that. It's a bit of a grab bag episode. We talk about a little bit of everything. We talk about Lon's encounter with the Sasquatch himself, when that got him interested in this field and in the paranormal and the unknown. We talk about the Mothman seen around Lake Michigan and Chicago recently. And we talk about all manner of things, particularly of interest to Stephen and I. We talk about the interdimensional theory. We talk about, just where these strange things are coming from, and maybe while we're seeing these things, some of the occult connections, some of the magic connections, and all around this was just a great conversation.
Yeah, yes. Talking with him was great. And, we kind of brought up a lot of interesting stories and just kind of a lot of good viewpoints on those.
Absolutely. Let's get right down to it. We want to thank Lon Strickler one more time for coming on the show and discussing this weirdness we love so much with us. This is Midnight in Kentucky in conversation with Lon Strickler. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Midnight in Kentucky. Tonight we are talking with the one and only Lon Strickler, author, proprietor of Phantoms and Monsters, host of Arcane Radio and Beyond Explanation YouTube channel. Lon, how's it going tonight?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Of course, happy to have you. You are one of my favorite researchers in the field. I'm happy to be talking to you on the phone finally. You just do some fantastic work over at Phantoms and Monsters, and the way you compile the research and stuff. I've been a fan since I stumbled onto you 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a chore sometimes, but if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it.
Man, I feel you there. I understand that. Sometimes it becomes a job all on its own. But like you said, I think people that enter into the field of the paranormal, we're a little obsessed and a little, like this is our passion. So we're willing to put those types of hours and that obsessive, drive into it.
Well, it starts out as an enthusiast for the most part, and a few of us are able or willing to go further into that, and if we have the means to do it, then we do it, because we're sure not making any money doing it.
Absolutely. There is no money in the paranormal field. Well, Lon, we'll start out, with that age-old question. We asked this question of most of the researchers that we talked to on the show. How exactly did you get into the paranormal? What was that event that led to your love of the unknown? I know you talk a little bit about this on Phantoms and Monsters, but I would love to hear it, from your own perspective.
Well, it's kind of a long story, actually. I was born and raised, and I'm actually living there again, just outside of Gettysburg, and I used to spend a lot of time on the battlefield as a kid. And this one particular day, and this is during the summer, I rode my bike on the battlefield, and I was in the area where most of the action took place during the second day of the battle. On the right flank side, which is the area that they call Death Valley, and that's situated between Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the wheat field. So it's an area that had a lot of action. So anyway, I was on my bike and I was riding there. I'd stopped, and all of a sudden, it's like everything opened up. It's like a TV screen opened up almost. I was seeing apparitions, hearing gunfire, smelling gunpowder, screaming, the whole 9 yards. I mean, all my senses were heightened. And this lasted for almost 30 seconds, I believe. And this just suddenly stopped. It was like someone turned the TV off. I mean, it was weird, but I had known by this time that I had some, I was a little bit different than other kids in a way. I could sense spirit energy, and I later found out I was intuitive, and I had a few other abilities as far as sensing these spirits, or sensing what I'd say are energies. So as time went by, I started to, and really, I never really said much to anybody about it, quite frankly. My parents had no idea. They really didn't. It's not like I lived in a haunted house or anything like that. I was, it was something that I would experience in certain locations, like, where a lot of violence took place, like a battlefield. I'd go into an antique store, and my parents were antiquers, and they'd be dragging me in these stores, and all the energy that was built up, and all the attachments to items. It was harrowing sometimes, and
I can imagine that would be.
I'd go to a funeral or I'd go to a cemetery. It was the energy was always there. So but I got used to it, and as time went by, I eventually graduated from high school. I moved down to Maryland, and I was living near Baltimore, and by word of mouth, people were. Now this is back in mid '70s, so this is a time when, when you talk about somebody being a paranormal investigator, they kind of looked at you weird. But
right.
I had gotten involved with a few cases in Maryland and up in Pennsylvania, and I did this for a long, long time, and it kind of waned off as as life goes on. You kind of got other responsibilities, and you don't get involved in it as deep as you were.
Sure. Absolutely.
But I, when I had my Bigfoot encounter in '81, that's when my perspective of the paranormal or supernatural kind of changed. Well,
yes, this was a case that I definitely want to discuss with you, because just reading the case on Fans and Monsters, the write-up you did on it, that is a fascinating and extremely strange, it has a lot of facets to it. The cover-up aspect certainly is one of the most interesting. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that incident, because I definitely wanted to bring that up speaking with you.
Yeah, I used to be a fly fisherman. I used to do a lot of fly fishing, and I was living in Sykesville, Maryland at the time. So I one morning, this was in May of 1981, I went down to the South Branch of the Patapsco River, and I was fly fishing for bass. And basically, I was standing in the river, and it's not a real wide river at that point. I mean, at the most, it's probably about 20 yards across. So I'm standing there, and I notice across on the north bank a dog. I mean, this dog is walking around and sniffing around the weeds and such, and I didn't pay any attention. So I just went ahead and continued fishing until I heard the dog yelp. And when he left out that yelp, then I looked over in his direction again, and there's something stood up in the weeds, and I could see it stand fully erect, but I could only see it from the chest up because the weeds were so high. And
right.
I saw it. He started moving to my left, and he walked out of the weeds and turned and looked at me. And we locked eyes for maybe about 10 seconds. This thing was, I'd say, 7.5, maybe 8 foot tall, very hairy, dark brown hair, somewhat matted, and definitely male. I could make out the genitalia on this thing. Very wide shoulders. The head, no neck on it, and the head was conical. But the one thing that was very interesting to me was it looked human in a way. I would say it looked Neanderthal, like an early man. I mean, it had the deep brow ridge, but the face did not have as much hair as the rest of the body. It was sparse around the face. Sure. And it was looking at me, and I was looking at it, and I'm thinking, I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest with you. I had heard of Bigfoot, but I wasn't even really sure if this is what that was. So it turned and started briskly walking up into the woods. And by the time I picked my jaw out of the water, I turned around and got it back up into my car and started heading back into Sykesville to report it. So, I did get to my car. That dog actually got himself across the river, and he looked fine. So, I didn't, he was okay, so I didn't bother with it.
Sure.
So I got in the car and drove back to Sykesville, which was only about a mile. It was about a 3 or 4 minute drive along River Road there. And I got to the nearest phone, which is right outside that bar. It was right there on the used to be there by the along the river, and I called the local police, Sykesville police, and they kind of hem and hawed me a bit, but I told them, look, I'm telling you what I saw. So they said, well, go back, and we'll have an officer meet you there. So I'm thinking I'm going to end up driving back there and waiting all day for this cop to get there. So, I drove right back. 3 or 4 minutes, and by the time I got there, this Maryland State Trooper actually had a barricade. You know, they had like the old easel, sawhorse barricades back then.
Sure, yeah.
Across the road. And I pulled up, and he had me roll down the window and say, "Hey, you got to get out of here." I said, "Look, I told him what happened. I had made the call. They told me to show up." He acted like he didn't even know anything about that. So he said, "Look, you got to turn around and go." I said, "Okay." So I turned around and went back home. So I was home for about an hour or so, and I changed my clothes and everything, and I decided, well, I'm driving on back down there to see what's going on. So I did. I drove back down. By the time I got there, I had to park probably a quarter of a mile from where I had seen this thing because the cars were all up and down the road. And when I finally walked up there, there was a Howard County cop standing there and a few other people. And I asked him, I said, "What's going on?" He kind of laughingly said, "Someone said they saw a Bigfoot." Yeah, well, I didn't tell him I'm the one who made the call. And, I was looking around. I mean, there were people with dogs up in the woods, in the weeds, all up and down the river. There was a large white tent set up in the area where I saw this thing. And there were vehicles, local, state, and federal. I mean, back then, the Feds used to drive those black Wagoneer vehicles, and there were two of them sitting there. And I heard a helicopter, didn't actually see it, but I heard it. So, I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, and, they weren't really doing anything, just walking around. I did ask cop if they found anything, and he said something about somebody had told him they found some hair or something, but I didn't think anything about that. So I decided, well, I'm just going to go back home. So I figured, that was the end of the incident. So anyway, even though it was strange that these cops all showed up there. So I went back home. I called the local television stations. And at that time, the Baltimore had 3 television channels, and I called all 3 of them. And I told them what happened, and I talked to the news editors at each one. They all told me, well, look, we'll give you a call back a couple of days, or you want to call us back. We definitely want to talk to you. So, I figured, well, they're going to hear something. And, I talked to them. Well, 4 days later, I was waiting for the call. So I eventually called one of them back. And the news editor got on the phone. He said, "Look, I don't even want to talk to you about it." He wouldn't give me any reason why. And he just literally hung up on me.
Right.
So, that was kind of strange. So at that time I figured, well, I'm going to find out what the hell this all was, because I had no idea about what was going on. Though eventually I did find out several years before that there was a Bigfoot-like creature that they called the Sykesville monster that had been in the area and had broken into homes and chicken coops and garages and such. And particularly one neighborhood that had residents near the river. I was lucky enough to I was working at that time with someone who knew most of the people in that area. And he basically introduced me to everybody. So I was able to go get these reports firsthand from these people. And in fact, at the time, the only media that was, other than some of the TV stations that was recording this, was the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper. Wow. And, so I got to talk to people that had, who had seen this thing at that time, and a few other people that they had missed that finally came forward when they found out what I had encountered, and they didn't, they were a little less apprehensive about talking to me. So that was really my first investigation into something that was cryptid. So, eventually I had gotten a confirmation from one of the local police officers that was there. He confirmed everything. And I've had a few people confirm what was going on that day as well. So, yeah, that was my Bigfoot experience.
And geez, man, what a Bigfoot experience that is. I feel like there are many Bigfoot experiences that are just a creature in the woods, but with that experience, I mean, there's a lot there. What do you think was happening? I know you don't know for sure, but what do you think exactly was happening with the blocked off area and the feds showing up and, the media blackout of the whole incident?
Well, first of all, the Baltimore, Washington metro area has a lot of buildings and facilities that are just unmarked. People don't know what they are. And that river has a lot of them. They have large swathes of land that they don't even know what is on the land, and especially back in that time. Back in this early 80s, they had a lot of different things set up down there. So anyway, I did find out later from somebody at BFRO years later that a woman in Marysville, which is like 3 miles down the street from where I was, had seen a Bigfoot that same morning earlier. Now, the fact that she saw it and made a report to the local police, which down there would be Howard County, that she made that report, something must have happened previous to that the feds got involved. Now, did they have were they watch this thing, or had this thing escaped from somewhere, or I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it was damn funny to me. And, as the years have gone by, I mean, this is almost 40 years ago now. And, I still think and wonder why this happened. I've heard a lot of people who work in government tell me a lot of different stories of these type of programs, especially in and around the Baltimore area, the DC area. They're just a lot of facilities that people don't know what's going on.
Right.
And, you kind of take a lot of that with a grain of salt. And, but, it is interesting. So it gets you thinking, well, maybe this thing was part of some type of program or experiment or something. But, I mean,
sure, absolutely.
But as I got deeper into cryptid investigations, I mean, the sighting I had wasn't much different as far as the description of other, Bigfoot, especially in this part of the country. So I don't know exactly what was going on, but it was odd.
Well, it's interesting that you say the description. I don't know if you're familiar, and I'm sure you probably are, with Barton Noonley. He's a big Kentucky investigator.
Yeah.
He writes, of course, his family had the Spotsville monster encounters.
Right.
And in Mysterious Kentucky Volume 2, he talks about these various, different types of creatures that are seen in Spotsville. And one of those types of creatures is that type of creature that you described. It's that cone-like head, very Neanderthal-like, more human than a lot of, the furrier or hairier Sasquatch sightings, I guess.
Well, when it comes to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and hairy hominids, I believe that they really are some indigenous beings. I mean, I believe that there really are actual family pods, groups, just like in the Pacific Northwest, down in Florida,
sure.
Down along the Gulf Coast, all around into Texas. I believe that there really are. I mean, but as far as what people are seeing here in the East and other parts of the United States, Midwest and such, I don't believe these are indigenous beings. I'm a strong believer in this the interdimensional, supernatural aspect of these cryptids. And it's very rare that you will see multiple Bigfoot at one time, or say a juvenile and an adult. It's usually always one Bigfoot. Now, why that is, I don't know. There have been instances where people have seen these beings in conjunction with UFO sightings or orb sightings. I believe there's connections there. Up here in Pennsylvania, we've had all kinds of crazy sightings. And, there's particular hot spots where more sightings do occur. But I don't know. I mean, it's hard to put a finger on the Bigfoot phenomena. You've got people that are strictly flesh and blood that believe this thing is an indigenous being, but there are also many of us that just believe there's more of an explanation. Due to the fact we haven't found a body or there's not much real tangible evidence other than anecdotal or an occasional blurry photograph. So.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. And we too, me and Stephen are big into the interdimensional theory, or, maybe not even the interdimensional theory, but something that, some explanation for these things that is not, aliens as in extraterrestrial, maybe alien as an extradimensional, or, some type of consciousness, phenomena. But like you said, these types of events definitely don't seem like they are flesh and blood. And I listened to your interview with Nick Redfern that you did. I think it was last night. Was that last night? Yeah. And man, I love Nick Redfern. He's one of the best. But he was kind of talking about, and this is a big interest of mine and Stephen's as well. He was talking about, how at Loch Ness, of course, Aleister Crowley had the Boleskine House, and how he was doing these rituals and different things. And then I had listened to, I believe it was last week's episode, and I can't remember who it was. He was a researcher from New Orleans, and he was talking about the different types of ritual and spiritual practices that they do in New Orleans. And I just wanted, to get your take on the occult and on spiritual leanings in the paranormal and, in Bigfoot sightings, in hairy hominid sightings, because it definitely seems like there is this, this weird connection between all of it.
Well, it's all a possibility. I have thought about that a lot as well. The early people, the indigenous people, didn't really look at these cryptids as flesh and blood beings. They were spirit or some type of non-corporal being. It was part of their folklore, part of their religion. So the fact that there may be an occult aspect to these beings, some other means of the supernatural, to manifest them, I don't think that's beyond reality. I mean, one phenomena that has been reported more and more over the years is this glimmer man phenomena, almost like that boat you saw in the movie The Predator. I kind of think the guy who wrote that movie might have seen something like this eventually. I mean, at one point. Right. And I believe it's a good possibility that these glimmer man sightings may actually be a cloaking of a type of cryptid, possibly a Bigfoot. I don't know. But it does seem that more people are coming forward with these, and they are pretty intensive stories. They really believe they saw something, and who's to say it's not some type of cloaked cryptid?
Right. Absolutely. And, that's something that has drawn my interest more and more, the more I've gotten into, our own research, is this idea of, cloaked entities or cloaked cryptids or invisible beings even. And I know that you wrote a little bit about that on Phantoms and Monsters. And, it's interesting. And I don't know, I may give too much credit to some ideas, but it's interesting, there are a lot of photos out there of things that people are claiming are dogmen or Sasquatches. And when I look at those photos, I don't see anything. I see blurry splotches. I see black spaces. But the more I get into that, the more I wonder, are some people able to see these things? Because there are some people that are like, yes, I see it. It's absolutely there. And are there some people that are not? Kind of like, you talk about your intuitive nature. Is that maybe the reason that you had your Sasquatch encounter? Is there some nature about some people that seems to attract these things, or that they can see these things?
Oh, that's very possible. Even getting as deep as thought form manifestation. I mean, or is someone able to, to unconsciously manifest something like that, like a poltergeist, though it'd be a cryptid, or I don't know. That's possible, very possible. The mind's strange. There are a lot of things we do not understand as far as the human brain. So, I believe that it could be an explanation. You talk about the upright canine dogman phenomena. We've been pretty intensive as far as researching that here in Pennsylvania.
Yes, you guys have had a lot of
years.
Quite a bit of.
Some of the witness statements have come from. Well, some of them have come from game commission people. Officially they will not say. They will not acknowledge it. But we have 3 actual rangers within the Pennsylvania Game Commission who have presented us evidence, and in fact, one of them, he and his wife and 2 other couples actually had an encounter with one of these upright canines. And when several people see one of these things, it's probably doubtful it's some type of manifestation by one of them, but though that's not beyond the realm of possibility. I mean, but there is something. I think there is more of a supernatural explanation to that particular cryptid. We hear people talking about the dogman phenomenon, the upright canine. Everybody's got their own moniker for this thing.
Absolutely.
We've been getting reports of different types up here. I mean, the large lichens, which, if you ever seen the Underworld series,
yes,
people describe it pretty basically as what was in the movie. These 9 to 10 foot large canines that look like werewolves or wolves, and they got human aspects to them. And we also do get these quadrupeds that have some aspects to them that kind of look like they're human. Also, we've had a few of these sightings where they almost look like hyenas and have wolf heads. It's bizarre, but I don't believe, for the most part, that these are flesh and blood. They may be flesh and blood, but they're not indigenous. They're not here actually breeding and so forth. I think they're a manifestation. I've talked about this thought form process, either thought form or relic type of being that's able to come back through another time, through a portal of some type, or through some type of time slip and such. Many of us have talked about that and have heard these stories of people that experience that. I'm tend to believe that may be very possible when it comes to the upright canine phenomena.
Absolutely. You are speaking our language. This is the type of stuff that, of course, we have a lot of dog men, upright canid encounters in Kentucky. I think it's honestly one of our most prevalent cryptids, other than Sasquatch and things like that. Stephen and I have even talked to some researchers that have claimed that there is a war between the dogmen and Sasquatch, or that they are 2 species that are opposed to each other. Have you ever heard any? I'm just interested. Have you ever heard anything along those lines?
Oh yeah, I've heard that. I don't know if you remember J.C. Johnson, but he was doing investigations up in northern Minnesota at the time he passed away. And he was investigating an area there where there were two camps, one of Bigfoot and one of upright canines, and they were constantly battling for territory up there. And I have heard that as well. I have heard that here in Pennsylvania to a lesser degree. Most of the confrontations have been human, and I mean the older accounts were human in groups of these dog men or upright canines.
Right.
That has happened several cases up here. But it does happen. I mean, people do report this. So, I haven't seen the evidence as of yet to confirm that. But when it comes to territory, I believe that's very possible.
Absolutely. It does seem, it's interesting that you bring that up. That is very, that is, a kind of character trait of the upright canid species. It seems like they do like to, what's the word I'm looking for? They do like to show up in numbers, or they like to, cut people off in numbers. And there's been a lot of reports of that here in Kentucky, particularly in the Land Between the Lakes region, where, there's supposedly been some deaths caused by packs of these creatures.
Yeah, the one case near Louisville that I reported about 6 months ago, and I'm still trying to figure out what that was all about. But there do seem to be these attacks in and around the counties that surround Louisville, and I don't know exactly what's going on there. But yeah, you talked about the Land Between the Lakes. There have been all kinds of crazy phenomena going on there.
Absolutely.
And even strange humanoid like beings as well. It's you've read what I posted. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of and that's why I like the fact that you're an affiliate with my group, because if we do get something down there that I need looked into, I got you to look into it for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
we are ready and raring to go.
Yeah, well, as soon as I get one, you'll get it, because I just don't have I don't have a team member down there at this present time. So we'll there is a lot going on in Kentucky, and I'm talking statewide. You know this. I mean, it's east and west. Yeah. There's just a lot of strange things going there. I've talked with Barton Nunnally about this as well. I mean, I get some real strange stories down there that I just can't figure out at some point. But I mean, I look forward to being able to get something to you so we can get some answers to some of this.
Absolutely, we are looking forward to it. I know you posted. I know that you deal with a lot of cases. It was probably couple weeks ago, maybe. And it was right when we were doing our episode on Barton Noonley and on the Spotsville Monster and on the various types of cryptids that, are seen in Spotsville. You posted an encounter with, there's so many different monikers for creatures, but what seems to be like a rake-like creature, I believe it was in eastern Kentucky. More and more, and I say more and more, but then you start digging and there's accounts of these things throughout time. Like you said, indigenous people were seeing these things, seemingly normally.
Oh, you're talking about the entity at the Course Farm?
Yes. Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah. That was kind of bizarre. I mean, but it's not really unlike a lot of these pale humanoids that people have been describing. And we've been getting cases in the past couple of years. I mean, more and more of these. I have no idea what they are. I mean, I'll tell you point blank. I don't know what they are, where they're coming from, what's the reason behind it. But we have a couple cases up here in Pennsylvania that we're looking into now, and hopefully we'll get some answers to that, to where I can kind of get an idea of what it is going on in other parts of the country. But no, this is a phenomenon that's becoming more prevalent as time is going on. So, all I can do is report it and hopefully get a case where we can go to the location and absolutely and follow up with it.
Absolutely, and that is an aspect of this that I like to kind of reverberate with people throughout the show is you kind of get these cases and there's only so far you can take them until it's like, well, here we are. We've done our research, we've walked this up to it, but here we are without other than the connections we've made, we're still left moving from case to case. And I think honestly that has taken a lot of people out of this research, either by them just giving up on it completely, or them kind of losing their mind with it all.
Well, it can get frustrating. There have been reports where I've talked on the phone with the witness and gotten some details and promised that we could come in, they'd tell us where to go, and that just falls through. Now, the reason behind that, there are a lot of reasons behind that. Sometimes they get spooked by it, or they decide that they better leave as is. People are still very hesitant to follow up with these reports. That's what has made this whole thing with the winged humanoid phenomena that we've been getting in the upper Midwest around Lake Michigan very important, because the number of witnesses we've had in those cases and their forthrightness and their sincerity, and then following through with actually talking to an investigator on site, that has been remarkable. That does not happen a lot in cryptid investigations. Many times people leave you hanging. And
absolutely.
But we've been fortunate enough to be able to talk to these people, and it's an ongoing phenomenon. But hopefully we start getting reports like that from some of this other phenomena that we investigate.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I've been following the Lake Michigan Mothman story pretty closely since it started. Geez, it's been a few years now. 2017, is that when it really started to pick up?
Yeah, the spring of 2017. Though, if you look back, there have been other sightings. 2011, there were 3 sightings in Chicago. Then, as we've been going into the investigation, some of these older sightings, people have come forward and told us about what they experienced. That whole area, that upper Midwest in particular, is rife with winged beings. Not just humanoids, but pterosaur, thunderbirds, all kinds of large and unusual bird or flying type creatures, gargoyle, the whole 9 yards. This thing that we've been investigating, people have said, "Oh, it's the Mothman," or it's the Jeepers Creepers creature, or a gargoyle, and a large owl. It's kind of run the gamut, though. It's been more consistent in the past 3 years as to being like a bat-winged humanoid, with a wingspan anywhere from 10 to 15 foot, and many with red eyes, just like the Mothman. Though I hate calling it the Mothman, though that name kind of stuck with everybody, and the press started pushing on that name, so I don't know. I went along with it for the most part, but I do hate calling it that.
Oh, absolutely. But you're right. When it seems like the Mothman has struck again, of course, that's going to be the lead, I was really interested, though. I think you talked about this. Maybe you talked about this on the Nick Redfern episode. It may have been the one before that. But you were kind of talking about this case. And, of course, Tobias Wayland, he wrote an awesome book about the whole thing. But you were talking about it. You said that the city had kind of been reluctant to help you guys out. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit, because that was like like in your Bigfoot encounter, you know, that whole cover-up aspect. That was the most intriguing part about that for me. So, is there anything you can elaborate on that?
Oh yeah, I mean the city itself and the police department and city hall. I mean they have not been cooperative at all. Even security companies. We had the police. We actually had a police officer come forward to us after he had a sighting with him and his partner in a neighborhood, and among other people that were had seen it, and he reported it to us. Very detailed report. I mean, the guy was, you know, he talked to one of our investigators by phone, and he wasn't going to do it until his boy really talked him into it. I mean, so he went ahead, and he said he filed the report with the police department. Though we did file a FOIA. In fact, we filed 3 FOIA requests, and each time it came back that there's no record of it. So, you know, that's not unusual because we've had that happen before. But no, I have asked for cooperation from the city and just have never gotten anything. And security companies from buildings where an incident would happen, and none of the security footage has ever been made available. So yeah, it's been a pain. I mean, actually, one of our witnesses had a sighting of this thing and reported it to us. And she came right out and told us, because she worked in the mayor's office. And she came right out and told us, said, look, you guys aren't going to get anything from the city. It's just not going to happen. Because they've got a concentrated effort. They are not happy about the whole thing. And for what reason, she believed it may have been because of tourism. But I don't know what the reason was, quite frank with you. But you know, it wasn't a huge uproar, but there was an uproar within a lot of the citizenry of of the city of Chicago. Quite frankly, during 2017, in the months of July and August, I was literally getting up to 20 phone calls each day and night from citizens, people that had heard about it, calling me and wanting to know what was going to happen. I mean, they believed that harbinger theory that came out of the Silver Bridge collapse, that any sighting of Mothman means something's going to happen. And I was having people were coming forward to me and just begging me to tell them what was going to happen so they could prepare themselves. And I tried to downplay as much as possible.
Absolutely.
I don't believe the harbinger theory. I haven't seen anything to really prove that, winged being or anything else is some type of harbinger. So, Yep. So that's what we were dealing with and still dealing with.
That is very interesting, though, that you had upwards of 20 calls per day. Stephen and I were actually just talking, about the state of the world in general before you got on the line with us. And, I've always heard that history may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. And you getting those calls is almost reminiscent of back in '67 with John Keel getting all the calls and the people wanting to know what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's interesting when people start hearing about something like that. They're not getting the full story. They're getting the media's interpretation of what's going on. And, then they will eventually find the write-ups on the blog or somewhere else and start looking into it. Then they start getting scared. And, the fear was palpable, actually. I mean, people were calling me. I had people crying on the phone with me. It was that bad. And, I was really getting tired of it, to be quite honest with you, because I had to keep telling people that I have no proof anything's going to happen. I'm just reporting as what people are seeing. We're investigating it. We're trying to get answers for it, but at this point, we really have no idea what this is. So, and we still don't quite actually. I mean, you know, since October last year, it's been almost a year now, 1st of October, we had the first real confirmed sighting around O'Hare International, the Rosemont area and O'Hare International. And most of the sightings since that time have been in that area. So, as well, we're getting strange phenomena, other humanoid sightings, UFO sightings above O'Hara, possible abduction or ascension of some type of humanoid into a craft. Interesting. We've had 2 pilots come forward who had seen this thing while they were in their planes landing or, you know, taxiing or in a transport on the O'Hara grounds. We've had employees. We've had TSA security people. O'Hara, the folks at O'Hara who are running the show, they know what's being reported, and they're trying to downplay it with the employees. They're telling them it was probably a large owl they saw. That's the story I'm getting told by a lot of people around Chicago, that they're being told to just ignore it. It's just an owl. Or, you know, wow. Yeah, it's bizarre, but
very, very, and very interesting. Stephen and I actually have a family member who works in the Chicago mayor's office. And I remember at the time, I shared the post, one of the posts that you had made about it. And, just seeing it from that side now and hearing what you told us about that experience, you know, she was wary. Of course, you know, being around me and Stephen, for most of our lives, she is more up to date on these things than I think most of the mainstream public is. So she knew, you know, the legends and the myths, and she was very weary. And she said herself, you know, well, if there was ever a cover up, it would be the city of Chicago that would do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're used to that, quite frank with you. I mean, I know people that have worked in the Chicago government before, and I knew I was going to run into a wall most likely when this started happening, but it just hasn't been easy. We've just been lucky enough to have the witnesses that have come forward, and a little bit of cooperation from people in the know, like, you know, pilots or police officers or other officials off the record. So, yeah.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. Hey, Lon, I got a question for you here. Something I'm interested in. I know, like, in Kentucky, we have a lot of, like, mutilations that's went on over the past few years, like in Monroe County and then up around the Louisville area, like you mentioned. Is there anything like that goes on in Pennsylvania?
If it does, I haven't known about it. I haven't been told about it. That's what made this story near to Louisville interesting, because, in a way they tried to make it sound like it was a pack of dogs that might have attacked that kid. I don't believe that's the case, because whatever attacked him grabbed this kid and moved him up a hill. I mean, up a rocky hill. And I just don't believe it was just a regular dog, even a large dog. This was something that had some size to it. And in relation to some of the other accounts I've gotten out of Kentucky and in the areas around Louisville, I believe that there's definite some type of large unknown canine in that area. So, or several actually. So, as far as what's going on in Pennsylvania, we have not had any attacks, as far as with these creatures. I do know one thing, though. They do stand their ground. They will not back off. And I'm quite, and I've actually had hunters walk up on these things. And these things are so big, they don't even think about taking a shot at it because they really don't know what they're dealing with. And they just they just put their gun to the side and walk back as quickly as they can because they don't want to have no dealings with it. And, so, that's kind of what's going on there. But no, we haven't heard of anything like that around here.
Yeah, I know back when Ben and I was looking into all the incidents like there in Louisville, we even went back like historically over maybe the past, 10 years or more of those similar incidents. And it seems like it's around Louisville and then it kind of went down maybe the corridor there for the interstate down into like the Mammoth Cave area in south central Kentucky, and it's almost like every county had it like in a little trail, and then it kind of encompassed Louisville area. And then, we've had the recent ones there, this past year, the boy being killed. And it's just interesting how, all these animals have been mutilated, and now it's kind of escalated to a point of where, a human was killed.
Yeah, I mean, there's something definitely going on there. It's, they're trying to excuse it away with, being just regular, dogs or feral dogs or whatever. But there's definitely some creatures in there doing this. And, just because it's Kentucky itself, there's just a lot of weird energy down there. And it's, they're just, because of the wilderness and the caves and everything else, it's kind of a unique situation in Kentucky because there's a lot of different places where these things can hold up and just not be seen. And, I just believe that, just a lot we just don't know down there.
Absolutely. Kentucky definitely has its own unique and strange energy that, even down to the terraformation of Kentucky, like you were saying, the landscape, we have a very unique landscape in Kentucky that seems to be a, homing ground for all sorts of strange things from UFOs to, dogmen to a litany of hairy hominids to lake creatures. We run the gamut for sure.
Yeah, I would say, as far as, a variety of phenomena, Kentucky's probably it's definitely in the top 10, maybe even the top 5 as far as states wise in the United States. As far as reports that I've received, they seem to come, we get a wide variety of cases in different places, but I'd say there's like 20% that come from certain states and certain areas that just seem to continue to be reported. So, and Kentucky's part of that.
Absolutely. I was looking at something the other day, and I'm not sure that this is confirmed by any sort of a scientific process, but it did kind of stand out to me, and I thought, that's interesting, given, the paranormal incidences here. It was a map that showed, that maybe the Highlands of Scotland and the Appalachian Mountains were once the same mountain range until, of course, the landscape shifted on Earth and those things drifted apart. But of course, Scotland and that region has a long history of the Fae and of legendary creatures. And so, if those are the same mountain range, and of course Kentucky and this part of the world has air collection of air long legacy of these things, it's interesting that, maybe once upon a time those things were the same thing, and maybe there's just something with these mountains that these creatures are attracted to.
The whole Appalachian mountain range runs from northern Georgia the whole way up into Canada, quite frankly. I mean, it's
sure.
And when you talk about the tectonic plate movement and what they judged that may have been connected, I think the Highlands were connected to the maritime area in Canada at one point.
Right.
And the topography of Scotland is very similar to what we see in the Maritimes and down into Maine and such. It's
sure.
I've seen that as well. I mean, it's very similar. So yeah, maybe some of that is connected somehow.
Right. Well, Lon, it has been an excellent conversation this evening. I've just got a couple more questions before we wrap up. One of those, very simple. What advice would you give to somebody that's just entering into the paranormal field, wants to become a field researcher, wants to see this stuff for themselves? What would you tell them is the best first step that they can make?
Not believe what somebody is telling you. In other words, someone who's been involved with this for a while. Go out and make your own judgments and stick to them. You find the evidence and follow up on it. It takes some, you got to be enthusiastic about it. Then you got to persevere in that enthusiasm and then go deeper and try to find some answers. You're going to get all kinds of opinions from people that have been involved with this for a long time. I mean, but you got to realize those people are probably set in their own standards. They probably, they kind of have accepted the dogma of the old cryptozoology, legends and formats and such. I think people that are involved with this now need to be more open-minded and be able
Absolutely.
to accept witness testimony more so than what it has in the past.
Yeah.
That's one thing I have learned over the years, that when you get involved with this, somebody contacts you and tells you what they think they saw, sincerely think what they saw, you have just become part of their experience because they're telling you, and
Yes.
they're seeking answers and they want to know what the hell they saw. And when you do take that information, that's up to you to try to do the best you can to give them answers. And that's what we do. I mean, and I think most sincere investigators of cryptids are the same way. There does seem to be a new tribe of crypto investigators nowadays. I mean, of course, they're younger, they're more open-minded, but they're willing to go and delve into it a bit deeper and come up with some theories that are going to kind of go against the norm, but so be it.
Man, I love that answer. That was an amazing answer, and I couldn't agree more. If anything, I feel like this field needs, people that are going to think outside the box, that are going to think beyond aliens from the planet Venus or Mars. Even though there may be aliens from the planet Venus or Mars, I think we need to go beyond that. I think it's far past time that we start looking at these things in a much, much weirder light, for lack of a better term. Which that kind of brings me to my last question. Just to go out on something spooky, just to go out on something creepy, can you give us a brief synopsis? Make it as long as you want to, but we'll be fine with a brief synopsis of what you feel like is the strangest or weirdest or oddest case that you have ever worked.
I get asked that a lot, and I really don't have an answer to that, to be quite honest with you. I've run into so many weird things. I don't know. I guess it would have to be something that I just can't explain. I'd say the winged humanoids. And I even had an encounter in '88 that I just can't explain. And, that kind of, of course, with these cases coming to us for the most part up and around Lake Michigan and Chicago, then we have the opportunity to look into this deeper and then to get firsthand accounts because of it. We've been damn lucky. We really have. And I feel fortunate because of it. And I'd almost had to say that this winged humanoid phenomenon, just not up there, but all around North America is quite interesting. And, you know, if we're able to figure out why this is happening, I think it's going to be a surprising reason and answer why.
Absolutely. And, you know, I agree completely that the winged humanoid phenomena is definitely probably the strangest of the phenomena. And, you know, it's the incorporation of all the different aspects of the phenomena. Where these winged cryptids show up, it seems like orbs show up, UFOs show up, men in black show up, strange creatures show up. It runs the litany of the phenomena where these winged creatures show up. So I can definitely understand that answer. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, I've been, you know, ever since I had my encounter in '88, and even before that, because I knew of the Mothman sightings at Point Pleasant. And, you know, since that time, I've received a lot of sightings in West Virginia and in Ohio along that Ohio River Valley. That Ohio River Valley is just nuts. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much that has happened. I mean, from Cincinnati all the way up to Pittsburgh, it's just a lot going on. And, you know, I think it's an area in particular that needs more investigating. There's a lot of legends that come out of there from people that have lived there, even with the early tribes that have lived there. And it's been home to a lot of conflict, a lot of strange legends and conjuring and the whole 9 yards. It's, you know, it's one of the weird places in our country. Absolutely.
And, you know, to talk to a lot of people, you hear about out west, you hear about New Mexico, of course, Nevada, but there's definitely just a unique and prevalent weirdness about every type of phenomenon in this area. So, yeah. 100%. Well, Lon, it has been fantastic. I'm so glad that we finally got to have you on the show. Tell people where they can find you. I'm sure they know already, but tell us again.
You can find the website at famsandmonsters.com. Our team site is cryptidhunters.org, and we have our cases. We've been listing our cases there. It's a fairly new site, and I've got all the investigators listed in there. And we're also on Beyond Explanation YouTube channel, where we present the short scenarios from firsthand accounts that I've received from Fams and Monsters, as well as we're starting to produce documentaries. And Arcane Radio is also archived there as well. And Arcane Radio is our live show each Friday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And tomorrow night we have another Ask Lon Anything chat over at YouTube at the Beyond Explanation channel. So that's at 9 o'clock Eastern as well. So come on over and ask some questions. And if my voice holds out, I'll answer them the best I can.
Amen, man. I understand that completely. Absolutely. But, you know, I know you was having some tech trouble on the last Ask Lon Anything, but
we tried to work it out. Yeah, we had a problem with the actual internet connection and YouTube kind of petering out on us. So, yeah, hope we got that resolved tomorrow night.
Well, I'm excited for it. I will definitely be tuning in. Lon, appreciate it so much. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, and we'll be talking.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned after this from our Midnight in Kentucky. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to Midnight in Kentucky. What you have just heard is Midnight in Kentucky in conversation with Lon Strickler from Phantoms and Monsters. A doozy of a conversation, a grab bag of the supernatural. Just some really deep talk on a lot of these different things. One of the things I thought was so interesting, was Lon's initial encounter that got him interested in this thing. One of these Sasquatch-like entities, much like Barton Noonley and a lot of people here in Kentucky describe. Of course, this was in Pennsylvania where Lon saw this thing, but it was the cone-shaped Sasquatch, more Neanderthal, and we have an episode coming up on the different subspecies of hairy humanoids or hairy inhumanoids. But, I thought that was interesting. And I also thought it was interesting that, there's the complete lockdown of this place where he sees it, this creek, there's this complete cover up of this. What a interesting initial encounter. And to be fair, though, that wasn't even Lon's first encounter. His first encounter he describes as a moment of clairvoyance where he's riding his bike as a kid, and suddenly this window opens and he starts hearing screams and starts hearing shouts and gunfire and smelling the powder from the battlefield and all this stuff. And that kind of goes into something you and I have talked about on many occasions. Are people, are certain people more susceptible to these events? Was it because Lon was, has this clairvoyance that he saw these spirits of the battlefield and that he saw this Sasquatch-like creature?
Yeah, I definitely think people are more, or I'm going to say certain people are more prone to having these type of experiences. And definitely Lon is one of those people, and what he experienced as a child. And then, as he, got older and then he's seen the Sasquatch there was just amazing stories. I believe, we kept going. We probably could have had, many more. And, when he's seen the Sasquatch and, he was talking about the lockdown there, that part amazed me because, obviously the people who locked it down, they was doing that for a reason. They just don't lock down, part of a forest area for no reason.
Right, absolutely. But how many times, and this is getting a little off subject, I guess, but how many times have you and I heard about these lockdowns or these, barring of places in incidences like that, from UFOs to Sasquatch sightings, and more specifically to missing 411 accounts, which of course all this may and probably is in my mind related, but it seems like those locking down circumstances happen quite a bit when something like this happens.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of like whoever moves in and locks things down. And a lot of times the Park Service or the Fish and Wildlife Service is involved in this in some form of these lockdowns. And, we had, I don't know if it was locked down over there in Monroe County back when all those incidents occurred, but, the Fish and Wildlife was over there and they was kind of having a dispute with the local sheriff on exactly what happened. And then, when people go missing, in national parks, it is the Park Service that initiates the lockdowns. And there's not really much explanation into what is, what occurs or what these lockdowns are for. They just still we're locking down and it's, almost in a classified information, type of event.
Right. There weren't official lockdowns in the Monroe County massacres. I don't think there was ever like an official blockade of certain areas, but there definitely was, the Fish and Wildlife and the sheriff telling people to stay inside and keep your kids inside and all of that. Something though that Lon reminded me of, and this is something you and I have spoke of. I think we've talked about this on the show and off the air as well, but something that Lon's experiences made me think of were these people who have, several paranormal experiences that have like, encounter after encounter with things. And of course, Lon hasn't had several experiences, but he definitely has had at least two with, one with this Sasquatch creature, one of this clairvoyant moment. And, that makes me kind of think of James Bunch and his litany of experiences. And it makes me think about a lot of people who have had several different types of paranormal experiences and how, previous to this era of paranormal research, because I think, we're getting into a more enlightened age of paranormal research now, and we're starting to think about things in a larger way. And we kind of talked about that with Lon there at the end, when he said, don't listen to these older researchers, especially when they tell you they know something, because you need to do this research for yourself. That's how we're going to progress. But as we get into this age, this new age of research, it makes me realize that, used to people like that come forward with those vastly different experiences were criticized and maybe thought that they weren't as truthful as some others. But as you and I have learned recently, particularly with some findings in the James Bunch case, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about soon, that's not always the case. And maybe these witnesses that have these multitude of different experiences and these multitude of experiences, maybe their experiences should be looked at more, because obviously something is happening to these people who have these experiences, time and time again, whether they're with dogmen or clairvoyant moments or UFOs or Sasquatch.
Yeah. And even, if for anybody who reads up on this type of phenomenon, this is a common occurrence in people who, experience something once. Most usually there's other types of experiences they have throughout their life. Even people we talked with at Crypticon, I think in the communion letters, there's a lot of mentions of people having multiple experiences throughout their life. I want to say maybe Calvin Parker mentioned, he had, a couple. And it seems like the more people we talk to, and start getting one story out of them, there's 2 or 3 more stories to follow that in addition to, to the story they were telling us.
Absolutely. And it always seems like, you can, once you ask a person about one incident and then you ask them, well, has anything else ever strange happened to you? They may have not thought about it before, but then those experiences start coming out and out and out and out and out and out. Another thing that interested me about Lon's interview was, the fact that he's very upfront about the city of Chicago, kind of being abrasively against them coming into Chicago and talking about this Mothman that's being seen. And again, that's very much like his initial encounter with the Sasquatch, where the area was locked down and things were, pushed back. And it makes me wonder if there aren't more instances of that, more instances of people being like, we're just not going to talk about it. And, that, and I'm not casting any blame here, but that certain researchers just don't talk about that aspect of it. But with a researcher like Lon, he's more upfront and like, yeah, look, we're getting pushback on this. People don't want us to talk about these things. And, it kind of seems like you and I have run into that in our own research a couple times. Like there is pushback from certain parties, and it's not always Men in Black showing up at your door. Sometimes it's just officials being like, look, we're not going to talk about that. And we would appreciate it if you guys wouldn't talk about that. I thought that was interesting too, that in Chicago, that Lon says that, these officials in Chicago aren't really wanting to speak about the Mothman events that they're seeing up there. Or, I know he doesn't like to call it the Mothman, and I certainly don't want to keep calling it that, that these winged humanoids, whatever they are, that, the city officials aren't wanting to talk about them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's anywhere you've got some type of commerce or anything like that. The politicians and the authorities, don't want people looking into, things with the Mothman, or even things like, that you and I have discussed on previous podcasts that take place here where we live here, in South Central Kentucky. And it seems like there's always kind of a pushback or denial or, you shouldn't be talking about this, attached to these events also.
Right. Absolutely. And I do find it interesting also that, we're starting to see a rise in these flying humanoid reports. Since you and I talked to Lon, since we recorded the interview, there have been another flying humanoid report I believe this one is from Illinois. And not only that, but we're starting to see these reports of jetpacks around airports, people in jetpacks. I mean, to me, that's a report of a flying humanoid. It doesn't always have to be a Mothman or something like that. We're starting to see reports of flying humanoids of every type. Creatures with wings, people with jetpacks, and these are coming from legitimate sources. These are coming from airline pilots and people like that.
Yeah, I've seen some reports of the people with jetpacks around, different airports, and it's kind of like, who do you know that had a jetpack and is brave enough to go up to that height with that type of device, And I want to say it's in Barton Nunley's one of his books, or in the book Aliens Over Kentucky, that there was some mention of a flying humanoid, with like a jet propulsion type device attached to them. And this was, several years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The jetpack thing has been come up time and time again. Those instances though, those instances at the airports almost remind me of like instances of UFOs over airports though. Just like with nuclear facilities, it seems like whatever these things are interested in our airports as well.
Yeah, it seems like it's coming maybe from the same type of place, if they're even coming from a place, who knows, where they could be coming from. But it does seem like, they are, connected to the UFO sightings in some form.
Absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a sighting of this Mothman flying humanoid entity around the O'Hare airport. I know that there was a UFO sighting there a few years back. So there's several supernatural events linked to this one place in Chicago. That's interesting. And it makes it that much more interesting. The city officials don't want to talk about it. So, one other thing, and this, I just like how this keeps coming up, in conversations that you and I have with people, is the fact, like I mentioned earlier, that it does seem like the paranormal community is going through this shift right now, that researchers are going through, and it's been a long time coming. I mean, this is nothing new. Jacques Vallée and John Keel both talked about, this interdimensional phenomena that they believe was linked to these sightings and these events. But, kind of like how Lon talks about at the end again, how coming up as a researcher, you should do your own research. Don't buy into things that other people tell you. That does seem like there is this new generation of paranormal researchers who are willing to accept the fact that these things are far stranger and far weirder than a lot of the previous generation of researchers seem to accept. And I like that, that's happening right now. It seems to be, whether it's Hellier and they're talking about interdimensional phenomena and elementals, or whether it's sites like Phantoms of Monsters, where, Lon is compiling information on UFOs and dogmen and Sasquatches, and he's not omitting the parts where, people who have had a dogman sighting are talking about orbs around their property. So I thought that was an awesome part of the interview, and I love that, he's so supportive of that new age of paranormal and supernatural study.
Yeah, and I like how, he does it. He doesn't go into one, I guess, part of this phenomenon and say, this is not connected to anything else. He's not just a Bigfoot person. Let me start that over. He's not just a Bigfoot person. He's not just a UFO person. He's kind of looking at all of them objectively and just letting, investigating them as they are. And that's the way I think we all should look at these, and not be isolated and have all these things in a different silo, because they are possibly all connected, but maybe not, but I think it does need to be examined that they are connected in some form.
Absolutely. Or at least the notion needs to be accepted just as seriously as the notion that UFOs are extraterrestrials needs to be accepted. The fact of the matter is, and I think we're coming to an end with all that, in, what seems to be a new age for humanity in general. I think we're coming to the end of that whole thing about how, it's joked about and and it's laughed at that people are having these types of experiences. I think we're beginning to wake up as a society and realize that these things are happening. I mean, regardless if we want to acknowledge them or not, it's happening. The Navy's reporting on UFO sightings, and all of it's being took much more seriously than it has been in the past. And with that, I think that, as a whole species, humanity is beginning to accept maybe we're in contact with something much weirder than just reality as we see it. And, all the notions have to be open. We have to keep all of our options open until something jumps out of us and says, this is what it is. And as far as that goes, that may be a very, very long time, but it is nice as a 30-year-old man now, that I'm beginning to see people wake up to that. Whereas when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, when you and I really started to get into this research, when I was young, there was not that. This was very much still something that was laughed about, joked about. But now those same people that laughed and joked about it are fans of the X-Files, are reading these New York Times articles, are having their own encounters. It's a crazy moment in history. And I don't even want to say crazy moment in history. It's a wild moment in history in many assets, but particularly in this field, it's a wild moment in history where everything seems to be flipping. More people seem to be believing, more people seem to be seeing things. And on one side, that may not be good. Maybe that's propaganda. Maybe that's disinformation bringing people to these things. I don't know. That's another conversation. But it does seem like the overall feelings on not just Sasquatch and UFOs, but on the weird and on the ultra reality or extra dimensional reality, or just on the fact that reality is stranger than it first appears. That idea seems to be blossoming at this point in human consciousness, or at this point in history, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like, people are starting to realize that, we're not alone, either in this reality or in this universe, and I think it's almost like a awakening for humanity. There's too many, people having, incidents that occurs, with them that they have. There's too much evidence now that it can't be denied. It can't be explained away. I mean, because, the evidence just points that there is something out there, and that people, I think, are slowly starting to accept it over the last couple of decades.
Right. Absolutely. And it does seem to be that way, whether it was, like we mentioned before, the X-Files being one of the top shows of the 90s, the whole paranormal, the whole paranormal culture that became from that. It does seem like maybe the culture has shifted that way over the past few decades, and there has seemed to be more people who come to these things and take to these things. And there's something to be said for that, and I think we mentioned it in this interview. It seems like sometimes the paranormal is used to bring people together in weird types of ways. It seems like, shared experiences of these things, they bring people together, or people's love of this stuff, of weirdness, of the fact that reality is not all it seems on the surface. That seems to bring people together in a weird way that, you can't discount with these events. You can't just overlook that because it's very real. And, Seth Breedlove kind of talks about this with the release of his latest movie, The Mothman Legacy. I read an interview with him, and he was saying, I'm not so much interested in the Mothman being real or not. I'm interested in how this has affected culture. And, that's a very heady idea and a deep idea, but I've said that many times, if you can't disprove an incident, and I'm not saying, that you and I don't try to disprove, or not really disprove, but we try to see things from every angle about what it could be, and then we try to make a rational decision on it. But let's say you couldn't disprove something, that you couldn't, that maybe somebody has a UFO sighting and it's an umbrella stuck in an updraft, but you could never prove that it was just an umbrella. It's still a UFO sighting, and it still affects culture in a certain way. And isn't that just as important as, a legitimate sighting, the effects that it has, because those effects are going to be the same. And again, I know that's a big idea and a heady idea, but it is interesting. And the way that culture has been affected over the years with these weird things, and the way it continues to be, the way, we see city officials covering things up and law enforcement agencies covering things up. And, then the love of it, the vast love of it, the love that supports sites like Phantoms and Monsters and like our podcast. It's weird how these things have affected culture so much, but to an outside observer, somebody who maybe doesn't follow these things, they think it's stupid or they think it's silly or whatever, or they don't believe, it can be very subtle. I don't think it's realized to an outside observer just how much these things have affected culture over the past, really, since 47. I mean, one could argue since the beginning of the world, but modern culture since 47 almost.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, had some effects on our culture and even, past, societies, there's always some type of, hieroglyphics or whatever it may be, or even like legends that's passed down from generation to generation of these tribes that, lived before us, of these type of phenomena, even though it may be ghosts, maybe some type of, something in the sky they see, which is what we call UFOs now, or even experiences with, dogmen and Bigfoot. These are all passed down, through the centuries, and we're still experiencing them today. And I think currently we have the technology that can capture, these events on camera, and people has more of a way to communicate these and share their stories than ever before. And maybe that's why people are taking it more serious, because it's kind of in the mainstream now. It's not just, something you see like the weekly world news at the grocery store when you're checking out.
Right. 100%. And it does seem like documentation of these things has gotten much better. And obviously, I mean, with the age of the internet, but it does seem like, legitimate documentation of these things with sites like Phantoms and Monsters and things like that has gotten much better as the ages have gone on, and it's been independent reporting on it. So, we're not relying on the mainstream news to give us information on these weird things. We're relying on independent investigators, or we're getting reports from independent investigators, which is very important. Like Lon, that's going to do it for Midnight in Kentucky this evening. Don't forget to follow us on social media. And until the next moon rises, Night Owls, for Midnight in Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Good night.
You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook.
Or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.